Captain Jake Morrison had been flying F-16s for 8 years, but nothing had prepared him for the moment when his targeting system locked onto coordinates that didn't match his briefing. The desert sun blazed through his cockpit as he flew in formation with 3 other fighting Falcons, their missiles armed and ready for what command had called a routine training exercise over the Nevada test range. But Jake's gut told him something was wrong when he noticed the GPS coordinates were 40 miles off from where they were supposed to be conducting maneuvers. Viper 1, this is Viper 2, Jake radioed to his flight leader, Major Bradley Stevens. My navigation is showing us outside the designated training area. Are you seeing the same anomaly? The response crackled through his headset with an edge of irritation that Jake had never heard from Stevens before. Negative, Viper 2. Stay in formation and maintain radio silence unless it's an emergency. Jake's training kicked in, but his instinct screamed louder. He'd flown this route dozens of times, and they were definitely not where they were supposed to be. Below them, the landscape looked different than the usual bombing ranges. Instead of the familiar crater-marked terrain of the test site, Jake could see what appeared to be a small civilian airfield with several unmarked aircraft parked in neat rows. His heart rate spiked as he realized they were approaching from an attack vector, not a training pattern. The fuel gauges showed they had been flying for exactly the amount of time it would take to reach the coordinates they'd been given, but those coordinates were wrong. Command, this is Viper 2 requesting immediate verification of target coordinates, Jake transmitted, breaking the radio silence order. The response came not from their usual air traffic controller, but from a voice he didn't recognize. Viper 2, you are cleared hot. Engage targets as briefed. Jake's blood ran cold. They hadn't been briefed on any targets to engage. This was supposed to be a formation training flight, not a live-fire mission. He banked slightly to get a better view of the airfield below and felt his stomach drop. Through his targeting pod, he could see people moving around the aircraft on the ground. Civilians. This wasn't a military installation at all. Someone was using their flight to conduct an unauthorized attack on what appeared to be a private airfield. Jake's mind raced through the possibilities. Either this was a massive communication error, or someone in command was running an illegal operation using their squadron as unwitting executioners. Viper Flight, this is Viper 2. I'm seeing civilian personnel at the target location. Request immediate abort and return to base. The silence that followed lasted too long. When Major Stevens finally responded, his voice was cold and mechanical. Viper 2, you will maintain formation and follow orders. Any deviation from mission parameters will result in court-martial proceedings. Jake's hands tightened on the controls as he processed what was happening. Someone had orchestrated this entire scenario, using their training flight as cover for what could only be described as an assassination mission. The question was whether Major Stevens was part of the conspiracy or just following orders he believed were legitimate. Either way, Jake realized he was the only one who seemed to understand they were about to commit an act that would destroy innocent lives and end their military careers. The targeting system continued to track the airfield below, and Jake could see his fellow pilots adjusting their approach angles. In less than 2 minutes, they would be in firing position. He had to make a choice that would either save lives or end his career. The weight of that decision pressed down on him as he watched the distance to target decrease on his heads-up display. Jake's father had been a military man, and he'd always taught him that following orders was paramount to military discipline. But his father had also taught him that there were times when a soldier had to choose between following orders and doing what was right. As Jake stared at the peaceful airfield below, watching people who had no idea death was approaching from above, he knew this was one of those times. The skull and crossbones warning symbol on his targeting display seemed to mock him as he prepared to make the most important decision of his military career. The radio crackled again with Stevens' voice. "Viper flight, arm weapons and prepare for coordinated strike. Target acquisition in 90 seconds. Jake's finger hovered over the weapon arming switch, but instead of flipping it, he made a different choice. He toggled his radio to the emergency frequency and began broadcasting what he prayed would save lives rather than end them. "Mayday, Mayday, this is Air Force Captain Jake Morrison, callsign Viper 2. I am reporting an unauthorized military strike in progress at coordinates." He rattled off the GPS position as quickly as possible while keeping his F-16 in formation. 4 F-16s are inbound to civilian airfield with live ordnance. This is not a sanctioned operation. Repeat, this is not a sanctioned operation. The response from Stevens was immediate and furious. "Viper 2, you are in violation of direct orders. Cease all unauthorized communications immediately." But Jake had already switched to the base frequency and was repeating his Mayday call. He knew that every second he could delay the attack gave the people below more time to escape and gave investigators more time to trace what was happening. "Viper flight, this is command. Execute strike immediately. Time is critical." The unfamiliar voice was back, and Jake realized this confirmed his suspicions. Their regular command structure had been bypassed. Someone was running this operation from outside normal channels, which meant it was either a black ops mission gone wrong or a complete betrayal of military protocol. Jake made his final decision. Instead of arming his weapons, he began a sharp climbing turn away from the target area. "Viper flight, Viper 2 is declaring an emergency and returning to base. I repeat, I am declaring an emergency and will not participate in this unauthorized action." His radar warning receiver immediately lit up as Stevens locked onto his aircraft with targeting radar. "Viper 2, You will return to formation immediately or face the consequences. Stephen's voice was barely controlled rage. Jake realized that his flight leader was either part of the conspiracy or had been compromised in some way. Either way, Jake was now flying alone against three armed F-16s piloted by people who viewed him as a threat to their mission. The next few minutes would determine whether Jake's decision to break ranks would save innocent lives or result in his own death. As he climbed toward the safety of higher altitude, he continued broadcasting his emergency call, hoping that someone in authority would hear him and intervene before it was too late. The airfield below was now a small dot in his rearview mirror, but he knew that three F-16s were still approaching it with deadly intent. His radio exploded with chatter as base operations tried to make sense of his emergency broadcasts. Viper 2, this is Nellie's tower. State the nature of your emergency and current intentions. Jake's relief was palpable as he heard the familiar voice of their regular air traffic controller. Nellie's tower. I have reason to believe my flight has been compromised and is about to conduct an unauthorized strike on a civilian target. I need immediate contact with base security and the wing commander. The silence that followed told Jake everything he needed to know. His emergency call had reached people who weren't part of whatever conspiracy was unfolding. He could hear Stevens and the other pilots arguing with someone on a different frequency, their voices tense, with the realization that their operation had been exposed. Jake continued climbing, putting distance between himself and the other F-16s while maintaining his emergency broadcast. Viper 2, this is Colonel Martinez, Wing Commander. I need you to explain your situation immediately. Jake's heart soared at hearing his commanding officer's voice on the radio. Colonel Martinez was a straight-arrow officer who Jake trusted completely. Colonel, my flight received orders to conduct what we believed was a training exercise, but we're currently approaching a civilian airfield with live ordnance. The coordinates don't match our briefing, and I've observed civilian personnel at the target location. What happened next would become part of Air Force legend. Colonel Martinez immediately ordered all F-16s to return to base and declared a base-wide security alert. The three remaining aircraft in Jake's flight found themselves being escorted back to Nellie's by a pair of F-22 Raptors that had been scrambled from a nearby base. Jake watched from high altitude as the airfield below erupted in activity, with people running to aircraft and vehicles as his emergency broadcast was relayed to local authorities. The investigation that followed Jake's decision to break ranks would expose one of the most serious breaches of military security in decades. Major Stevens, it turned out, had been compromised by a foreign intelligence service that had been planning to use American military assets to destroy evidence of their operations on American soil. The civilian airfield was actually a front for a smuggling operation that had been under FBI surveillance for months. Jake's decision to trust his instincts and break formation had not only saved the lives of innocent people, but had also prevented an international incident that could have destroyed America's relationship with several allied nations. The investigation revealed that the foreign operatives had been planning to use the attack to eliminate witnesses and destroy evidence, then blame the American military for the unauthorized strike. As Jake taxied his F-16 back to the flight line at Nelly's, he reflected on how quickly everything had changed. In the span of less than an hour, he had gone from a routine training flight to potentially preventing an act of war. The weight of his decision still pressed on him, but he knew he had chosen correctly. Sometimes following orders meant refusing to follow them when they were wrong. The debriefing that followed would last for days, with investigators from the FBI, Air Force Office of Special Investigations, and several other agencies that Jake couldn't identify. His decision to break ranks and broadcast the emergency had created a paper trail that investigators could follow back to the source of the compromised orders. What they found would shock the military establishment and lead to a complete overhaul of mission authorization protocols. Major Stevens was arrested as soon as he landed, along with two other officers who had been part of the conspiracy. The investigation revealed that they had been feeding information to foreign agents for over a year, providing details about American military capabilities and operations. The planned attack on the civilian airfield was meant to be their final operation before defecting to a hostile nation. Jake's actions had prevented not just a tragedy, but a major intelligence coup by America's enemies. The commendation ceremony that followed would be attended by senior officials from the Pentagon, but Jake knew that the real victory was simpler than any medal could represent. He had trusted his instincts, followed his conscience, and chosen to protect innocent lives over blind obedience to authority. The aftermath of the incident would reshape Jake's military career in ways he never expected. Instead of facing court-martial for disobeying orders, he found himself promoted and assigned to a special unit tasked with preventing similar security breaches. His experience had taught him that sometimes the greatest act of loyalty to one's country meant being willing to question orders that seemed wrong. Years later, Jake would often think about that moment when he had to choose between following orders and doing what was right. The skull and crossbones symbol on his targeting display had been more prophetic than he realized at the time. It had been a warning not just about the danger of the weapons he carried, but about the danger of following orders without question when innocent lives were at stake. The civilian airfield that had been the target of the planned attack was later revealed to be a government facility conducting classified research. The people Jake had seen moving around the aircraft were actually federal agents who had been investigating the smuggling operation. His decision to abort the mission had saved the lives of American law enforcement officers who were working to protect national security. The foreign agents who had compromised Major Stevens were eventually arrested and prosecuted, but the damage they had caused to military security protocols was extensive. Jake's actions had prevented them from achieving their ultimate goal, but the investigation revealed how deeply they had penetrated American military operations. The reforms that followed would make it much harder for similar breaches to occur in the future. Jake's story became a case study in military ethics courses, used to teach future officers about the importance of moral courage in the face of conflicting orders. His decision to trust his instincts and break formation had demonstrated that sometimes the most loyal act a soldier could perform was to refuse to follow orders that violated their oath to protect and defend the Constitution. The skull symbol that had appeared on his targeting display that day would remain etched in Jake's memory as a reminder of how close he had come to participating in an act that would have destroyed everything he believed in. His split-second decision to choose conscience over compliance had prevented a tragedy and exposed a conspiracy that threatened national security. In the years that followed, Jake would rise through the ranks to become a respected leader in the Air Force, known for his integrity and his willingness to stand up for what was right even when it was difficult. His experience had taught him that true military discipline sometimes meant having the courage to say no when orders conflicted with moral principles and the oath he had taken to protect innocent lives. The investigation into the compromised training mission would eventually lead to reforms in how military operations were authorized and conducted. Jake's actions had demonstrated the importance of maintaining clear chains of command and verification protocols that could prevent similar incidents from occurring. His decision to trust his instincts had not only saved lives, but had also strengthened the military's ability to protect national security. As Jake looked back on that fateful day, he realized that the most important lesson he had learned was that following orders blindly was not the same as serving with honor. True military service required the wisdom to know when to follow orders and when to question them, the courage to act on that knowledge, and the integrity to accept the consequences of those actions. The skull and crossbones warning that had appeared on his targeting display had been more than just a symbol of danger. It had been a test of his character and his commitment to the values he had sworn to uphold. His decision to pass that test had prevented a tragedy and exposed a conspiracy that threatened the very foundation of military honor and integrity. Jake's story would be remembered not just as an example of moral courage in the face of conflicting orders, but as a reminder that sometimes the most important battles are fought not against external enemies, but against the corruption and compromise that can threaten an organization from within. His willingness to risk his career to protect innocent lives had demonstrated that true patriotism sometimes requires the courage to stand alone against the crowd. The civilian airfield that had been the target of the planned attack was eventually closed, and its operations transferred to a more secure location. The investigation had revealed that the facility had been compromised by foreign agents who had been using it as a base for intelligence operations against the United States. Jake's decision to abort the mission had prevented the destruction of evidence that would be crucial in identifying and prosecuting the members of the spy ring. The 3 F-16s that had been prepared to carry out the unauthorized strike were impounded and thoroughly investigated for any signs of tampering or sabotage. The investigation revealed that the aircraft had been loaded with live ordnance through a series of forged orders and compromised personnel. Jake's decision to break formation had prevented the weapons from being used against American citizens and law enforcement officers. The Foreign Intelligence Service that had orchestrated the conspiracy was eventually identified and exposed, leading to a major diplomatic incident that would strain relations between the United States and several other nations. Jake's actions had prevented what could have been a successful false flag operation designed to destabilize American military readiness and international relationships. The reforms that followed the incident would include new protocols for verifying mission orders, enhanced security screening for personnel with access to sensitive operations, and improved communication systems designed to prevent the kind of command structure bypass that had made the conspiracy possible. Jake's experience had revealed weaknesses in the system that could be exploited by hostile forces. As Jake continued his military career, he would often be asked to speak about his experience and the lessons he had learned. His message was always the same. Military discipline and moral courage were not opposing forces, but complementary aspects of true service. The willingness to question orders when they conflicted with moral principles was not insubordination, but the highest form of loyalty to the Constitution and the people it was designed to protect. The skull symbol that had appeared on his targeting display that day would remain with Jake as a reminder of the responsibility that came with the power to take lives. His decision to refuse to use that power when it would have been wrong had prevented a tragedy and exposed a conspiracy that threatened the very foundation of military honor and integrity. The moment when he chose conscience over compliance had defined not just his career, but his character as a soldier and as a human being.